I have here a 1.2 turbo 3-cylinder Puretech engine from Citroen DS3. Sort of avoided the Puretechs because they're shite. Because any family members that ask me what car they should get, I've steered them towards 1.6 HDAs. The Puretechs I've really been very wary about because of the wet belt issues. Not only that, I thought maybe you could get a wet belted engine and as long as the belt was changed it might be okay, but then you're looking at the sump starving itself of oil because fragments of belt are down there, and I've heard of problems with the direct injection system suiting up. Not only that, then I've heard issues with them burning oil, so they're generally not well regarded. Nonetheless, here's one that a mate left round. He bought a Citroen DS3. I'll put a picture up on screen of the interior. And you see them seats, the car had to be saved. But I said leave the engine round to me and I'll do a disassembly video. If I ever get one of these in that needs a time belt on, I will try and do a proper video on it in the usual style. But this here, I'll just disassemble it and talk through sizes and whatever I notice as I go along. I'm not experienced at working on these Puretech because of the reasons we just mentioned, but it'll be interesting to get a full disassembly of this. At the very least, I'll have a box of nuts and bolts and bits and pieces off it. Mate can take whatever bits are sellable and what's not can go to scrap. I'm sure it's still worth a bit, and we'll know what's inside a Puretech at the end of it. First of all, I don't think I want to work with it dangling from the engine house like that. I'll put it on the stand, hopefully it fits. Fairly light engine, we lifted it out of the van, the two of us, for a bit lighter than a 1.6 HDI, which in itself you can lift by hand but not great for your back. That's noticeably lighter. Yeah, I just generally don't get 3-cylinder engines. I don't think they were really any good. Maybe I've been used to diesels, which get good economy already, but 3-cylinders in my opinion, especially the pedals, they don't seem to rev as happily or make a nice sound. In fairness, the turbo Puretechs do, when they're driving well, they do make a fairly reasonable torque band. It doesn't feel too dissimilar to a diesel. If they were looked after they mightn't be too bad, but they just don't have a good reputation. And I'm waffling, this is why I don't talk in the videos. I am inclined to waffle on a bit, but anyhow. I'll start the process by removing the inlet manifold and whatever components are sitting near it. So that's part of the engine loom there, it goes out of the road. These rubber mounts should be useful for the air filter housing on a 1.6, so I'll just hold on to them. Release that tab and then press it down. And there's a plastic clip here to release. And that vacuum line or whatever it is, fuel line maybe, is going around here, around the corner. And so there's where it goes there. Get that connector out of the road first. Release this connector, press hard down on the back of it, and then it should come loose from the part. That's it. And you can get this connector off. Not sure what that part does, but there's it off. Remove any wiring loom connected to parts. Pressing on the back of this connector. Throttle butterfly valve or something on this connector. Press it off. And save the loom, as you never know when it might be useful to have. one of these clips again, so press in hard on the back of the clip and then release it from the component. I don't know the names of all these components on this particular engine. I've never had to work on them, but I guess I'll just keep working away. That's it free. Engine mount bolts are 16mm. These pulley bolts are 13mm. The cover for the fuel. Ignition coils are an 8mm. I just keep disconnecting the wires. These ones going out to the injectors. Release the orange bit, pull it up the ways, and then there's the wee black bit at the lower part of the engine. This bit of wiring loom here towards the back, it's held onto the engine with these Torx bolts. Removed them 2 Torx bolts, and that should be that part of the loom mostly free. Whatever down in around here is still held in place. Not by much, mind you. We just clipped into place by the looks of it. I'll get these Torx bolts out of the road now. TX27. So that's now loose. I'll remove this coolant pipe. It's got a couple of 8 mils holding it in place, and whatever's holding it down into this, onto that there, that's 8 mils out. You're releasing an O-ring there to get it past. I guess there's an O-ring in here on the water pump side. This section of the wiring loom, it might have been easier removed before the engine stand was attached, but I'll pry it out of the road. I'm not trying to save it perfectly. But there's a couple of extra connectors just to remove here. This one. That one's already free. And there's one goes to that, possibly a crankshaft sensor down here. That's that side of the loom. It definitely should have been easier to have removed before putting the the engine stand on. We should be able to get most of this off now on this side. I got the engine loom completely off now at this stage, and then I'll have less distractions in the way of removing more substantial parts. Alternator terminal here, I think it's a 13. Aye, 13. I'll remove this alternator here now. This tensioner is an 8mm hex bit. Alternator bolts here are 16. And there's only 2 bolts used for the alternator. There's one of the loom connectors going to the air conditioning pump down here. Got this connector. At this stage the loom is mostly disconnected bar a couple of sensors here and one in there, and this wee bracket holding it in place. I think for convenience I'll take the air conditioning pump off on this bracket. It should provide a lot more access to see the clips holding that in place. So that I reckon is a 13mm bolt for the air. There's that bracket there. So that's one of the sensors. I'm sure you could route them in behind there, but I'll just remove the whole bracket while I'm here. And that'll be the last of the Loom out. So there's that sensor there. It's clipped onto that. It's going in there. Another sensor here and a plastic bracket by the looks of it. But once this whole bracket here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts are out, I should be able to see all that a lot better. Oil drain plug, 6mm hex bit. The turbo looks reasonably easy to remove. So I got 4 bolts there holding it onto the head. Manifold seems to be built into the head. There's your wastegate there. Seems to be alright. There's no wobble in the turbo shaft itself. So that's oil feed pipe. Oil return pipe has 2 Allen keys there. That lower one seems a bit difficult to access from here, so hoping that just comes out down there. And then there seems to be some sort of water cooling on it on this side. That pipe there, so I disconnect that, and this other pipe, I think if I get that clip out and push it out and then disconnect that, the turbo will come off. That's that really. 10mm hex bit. Either 11, sorry. Not the best way to remove it. There we go. Let's have a look at the rocker cover, the valve cover. Bolts that hold it in place, and then the fuel system. I think that's the high pressure fuel pump, and those are the 3 fuel injectors and the fuel rail. So remove this bracket, remove all the other stuff, and leave this as the treat to see the belt inside. There's a 17, 19, there's a 16. So that's the fuel pump. I'm assuming it's driven off the camshaft in some way or another. I'll know when I get further into the engine. Bracket here is 3 8mm bolts. I'm not sure what size this one is, but I'll just use the adjustable wrench. To get that sensor removed from the fuel rail. Either pressure or temperature sensor, I'm not too sure. And these 3 bolts here look like 13. The injectors seem to be held to the rail with a fairly substantial clip on each one. There's a good view of it there, so I think you need to pry it backwards to release it. Like that. Good pry up on the injectors. Actually, they haven't come out of the rail, but they're out now. I'll just go around and remove all the 8mm bolts that I can see. There's a fair amount of them. And now I should be able to remove the valve cover. And the belt's still intact. So that's the vacuum pump there, and then the coolant outlet plastic piece and a couple of brackets, so we'll take them off. Whatever that's for as well, take that off. Just remove anything in the road. Oil cooler there, 2 bolts. Dipstick, a couple of bolts. These sensors, probably cammed timing sensors or position sensors. And they're removed anyhow. And whatever that one's for, maybe an oil pressure sensor. We'll just continue removing stuff. There's a distinctive blockage there. Rubber particles on the vacuum pump. That seems to be one of the Puretech issues. There's bits of timing belt all through the engine because it's rubber. Pen. $13 and a big 8mm hack. Water pump 8mm bolts. Those are just clipped in. An O-ring on them, so you'd have to replace that, but and there's the vacuum pump. It's wee oil intakes full of if I can show you it any clearer. Yeah, it's like a rubbery. The timing belt up here is grand, but on the access panel, so yes, it has definitely strip tooth here. There you go. There's a couple of sensors here. That wee one there, held on with that 8mm nut, and that'll then make it easier to get that bolt out of the road. This knock sensor here looks like a 10. The lower engine mount, you know, for the drive shaft to go through, maybe a 13 or a 16. This cover has 4 8mm on it by the looks of it. That sensor there is 1 8mm holding it in place. That there will need a spanner of some sort. This here one down here is an 8mm. That one in there is some sort of hex or Torx bit, and then at that point there's not much left, so I'll just get stripping these sensors. That there one there, sorry, that's another 8mm, so just keep. Not exactly sure what's come out there, but something come out. Possibly oil pressure sensor. Oil level sensor by the look of it. E7, inverse torque E7. There's a bit of timing belt in that one. That's an inverse Torx E10. I think them two phasers have to come off. Take these inverse Torx bolts out. Probably a locking tool which I don't have, but I'll just keep going, and that might need to come off that lower crankshaft pulley. So here's also a 10. Nothing too special about the tensioner or the idler. Not ideal practice, but I'm using a screwdriver to lock that in place. Oh. So those bolts took an E14 inverse Torx. And then phasers come out of place. It's trapped by that lower pulley, so I'll have to remove it. That's the lower crankshaft pulley has that wee drive going to it there, and then engages with the actual tooth part of the sprocket, and that appears to be a friction fit, or once you tighten it down it must hold its position, which is a bad design too. I mean, I put a keyway in that. I just don't like the fact that them two can move independently of each other when they're doing such a crucial job. And there's the belt. Absolutely no teeth down here in the bottom, so that's why it's failed. We'll have stripped the engine a bit more to see the damage it's caused internally. But there's absolutely nothing at that span there. There's a close up of the belt, just stripped teeth, and then teeth here. So 60,000 miles. So look down into the engine there, that's the timing belt area. There's not much soot or anything like that, but there's a few wee traces of belt here and there. Not too bad. I think it's more that the belt has failed in this engine than starving itself of oil. I'll remove them 3 plugs. I think I've got most of the rest of the bolts here removed. And then take the camshaft carrier out of place and hopefully then get the head off. Inspect it, inspect the top of the pistons. You can see that there's a chain must be driving the oil pump. And that's a counterbalance there, or counterweight if you want to call it that. I can remove that cover there to get access to it. That's a really bad design though. Like, why did you go to the bother of putting the timing chain for the oil pump drive but not the camshaft? I should just have done a chain for the whole lot, which I do believe the later Puretechs are now using, so they've learnt from their mistakes here. But they just shouldn't have used a rubber belt. It wasn't a good idea at all. So it's a 12-sided 14. Spark plug looks okay. Couple more bolts for the upper cam carrier. That's it. There doesn't appear to be much residue in here, or bits of belt. But the others are okay. That cap has been cracked. That wasn't me, that was cracked already. I mean, given that the belt has snapped, you have some parts have to break. And that's not too bad. 1.6 HDIs, you put a set of camshafts into them, so you can forgive it needing that part. And it's only just a clean crack. It hasn't, there's no excessive scoring there on that camshaft, so there's a good chance that could be reused actually. The rest of them all seem fine. That one there seems a bit excessively scored now, to be honest. Bit of scoring there. I'm not sure what's normal, but that just seems a bit excessive. I'll compare these here by setting them back in place. It does seem to be scoring there on that cap. That's very definite scoring there. I can feel it with my fingernail. The screwdriver's hitting into it, so it is deep enough. And again, this one here. That's, yeah, I can feel it through the glove. This here, on the other side, this back camshaft seems fine in terms of scoring. So maybe that one there has been starved slightly of oil. Whatever has happened, so I'll take them out and see what the... Scoring the whole way on where the camshaft comes into contact with the head. This one's not too bad. There's in there. The head bolts are all inverse Torx E12. My tang tools E12 socket's not fitting down into this opening, which is a bit disappointing. Just trying another one. I had the Halford set I have doesn't fit either. It's even wider. Tang tools, no, it's not getting down in there. That's unfortunate. Don't do too much to the head just at this moment until I get the right socket to remove them head bolts. So I'll turn the engine over and remove the sump. Probably went the wrong way about that, but scrap is what this engine is, so I don't really care. I'm gonna guess there's a way to extract that more carefully. See an E12 there on it at the moment. It's likely the counterbalance is going to start spinning, so it's a bearing or something to hold it in place. Lock the crankshaft. Seems to be loose now. The sump bolts off first, and then I think the lower part of the engine it'll come off separately. It's a pressed steel sump, so yeah, watch you don't bend it. And watch when you're resealing it that it seals well. Alright. So there's a series of more 8mm bolts around the place. We'll remove all them, get the lower half of the engine off. So I have to take that bolt out holding the engine stand in place. Probably should have used that hole instead. And then a couple of these covers or bolts holding this cover in place should then let that bottom part of the engine come away. There's not much to see there, just bits of sediment or whatever. There's not really a huge amount of timing belt that I can see. The oil pump's more interesting. So here's the oil pump, and that's its pickup or the strainer, and it's absolutely full of bits of timing belt, and that's what happens. These Puretechs, bits of timing belt break off as the engine runs and blocks the oil pump. Basically starves the engine oil if the belt doesn't break first. I think here in this instance the belt is broke first, but could see with the camshaft up there the damage that it caused with that wear. I wouldn't really want to be putting this engine back together. I'll just show inside here how much residue or mess there is. And that's just pure time belt. In fact, that's a full tooth. Seems that the oil pump's only held on with them 2 bolts there, and hopefully when that's done then the chain will be slack enough to remove it. And that's the chain for the oil pump. Seems in good enough condition. That's the counterbalance sprocket. The big end bolts are 10 mils. The ones going to the pistons are slightly smaller, but they're all 12 sided, so I have to use 12-sided socks. Piston bolts are 12-sided 8 mil. These are the burn surfaces. There's that bit of timing belt or some sludge or some such thing that was in there. There's some sort of weird pitting on the burn surfaces. It's hard just maybe to show it perfectly on the camera here. The burns aren't perfect. And there's the big end burns there. I can feel that there's scores there. And that was the side that had that wee bit of residue. The rest of them not quite as bad, but there's a score there. Easily replace, you know, if you replace the burns, it probably would let you away. But that's engine work you probably don't want to do when you're doing a timing belt. And the crankshaft itself looks okay. I can't feel too much damage on it. Very light scoring, just. Not sure whether that would polish up or not, but that's it out. And then here's the back end of the pistons. Definitely an unusual wear pattern is visible. And there's the back of the pistons. There's wee oil jets there. They oiled them, so to get them out, I think they're a hex bolt of some sort. And that's the counterbalance there. So it was driven off here by that gear wheel or sprocket. Goes along the whole length of the engine. There's it there. There's a cover here, which I have to remove in order to slide it out that way, but that'll be easier done when the engine's off the stand. And bar that, the only thing left to do is take the head off. You couldn't remove the pistons up the way because they'll hit that web. So I'll have to remove the head to get the pistons out. These here are a 6mm hex bit. So inverse Turks E12, and it needs to be under 16 mil. This here one is 17 mil, so a mil off it. I ought to get a special socket there for this job here, going down and doing the head bolts. It's an E12 laser. The main thing is it's a long socket, or a deep socket that has the right diameter. It just fits in the more down there to get the head bolts off. I'll remove the head gasket now. Oh, it's a multi-layer steel by the look of it. That's that. I think by looking at them, the valves have come into contact with the pistons. That's a bit shiny there. Tops of the pistons, there's a bit of dirt and whatnot on them. Whatever that is. That's a bit dry. And this. Oil scraper rings, if they're getting suited up, possibly that's why these engines are prone to burning oil, as maybe just a direct injection problem. I am not sure, but that's the inside of the piston. The engine could well be worth rebuilding, but mate got a replacement engine cheap enough and he stuck it into the DS3, so he's happy enough just to use this one for disassembly purposes. I just have that pile of parts there. I will probably just go to the scrap or whatever, maybe turbo or things like that might be savable. Injectors should be, but that's the inside of the engine. The bore looks alright. I don't spend a great deal of time this level of engine surgery. Normally if it needs this much done, it's going to cost more than a replacement engine, but sometimes the price of new engines now, you do have to look about rebuilding. There may be not some particular engines, just they don't rebuild too well. Some did, but that's just what I'm seeing there at the moment. And the oil control rings are quite suited up. I dare say some of them valves have been bent. The camshafts are out, and yet them valves are some sitting slightly up proud. Most of them, in fact. I'm not sure what way this engine's meant to be, but I would assume that the valve should be closed without the camshaft in place. The camshaft pushes down on them. I don't have a valve spring tool, as I don't do engine rebuilds, but I'll try to see what way we can get this the valves out of place. I'm just trying shock the collets out of place. Not the most professional way to do it, but again, I'm not rebuilding this engine. Oh, that valve is definitely bent there now. Looking at the damage to the engine, it was mainly to the head due to the belt stripping its teeth. There was a wee bit of wear around the camshaft lobe and the carrier that held it down in place. They also the cracked one that was there as well. So it could possibly be rebuilt with a head. You may need to get pistons into it too. It's probably not worth doing that to this engine, but that was the damage that was caused, all because the belt stripped its teeth. But even at that, the wear inside the top of the engine, I wouldn't really want to be reusing this. You can hopefully see that scoring there is quite heavy. The side's not as bad, but yeah, that means that head's scrapped basically, because I don't know how you repair that. There's no removable bearing there, that's part of the head. And these are the valves that have come out of the engine. Definitely they've been very badly bent. In addition to being quite suited up. So yeah, every single valve there has been damaged. So that's a look at the Puretech 1.2. The idea of putting a timing belt in oil, just even when it come out, I remember thinking that just doesn't seem to make sense. Oil and rubber don't mix normally. Yes, they can change the chemistry of the oil and the belt, the rubber type, to make them more compatible, but dry belts have been working for decades now and no problems with them, provided that you change them on time. This here, I know there's a tool you can check it with. They seem to be failing prematurely, and people, if you don't change the oil on time, it seems to degrade the belt even further. So it's a combination of infrequent oil changes, not keeping an eye on the belt. It'll either starve the engine of oil, which you can see with the lobes of the camshaft, and then the belt will just strip. It'll damage the valves, pistons, whatever else. I'm not sure if these engines, if you do look after them, if you have the oil change interval, say do it every 5,000 miles, keep an eye on the belt, if it would be a good engine. They are fairly nice to drive. I mean, they have that 3-cylinder thrum and vibration, which I don't particularly like, but they still have a reasonable degree of torque, similar to the diesel actually, and they feel light on the road. So they're not that bad. If you had one that was looked after, it might last. I do believe that the later engines now are coming with a time and chain, which might improve things, provided that the tensioners and the gauge are made right. The oil burning issue, it might just be due to the fact it's direct injection and it's suiting up the piston rings. Again, I'm not an expert when it comes to the very minute details inside an engine. I'm not a mechanic by trade either. I just filter the cars in the spare time. Worked as a design engineer, now I'm doing software engineering. But it's just something I enjoy doing. Had the opportunity to take this engine apart. So it might help you if you're considering rebuilding one or want to know what the problems with the Puretech engine is. Understand nowadays that you've got ULEZ zones and whatever. Diesels are a lot less appealing because of the costs to run them and the emissions. So you might have to choose an engine like this. So if you must buy a Puretech, make sure it's been serviced. You know, have a good service history. Like if it says 20,000 miles and it's been done that often, I would rather see a car that's been serviced more frequently than just adhering to the manufacturer's guidelines. Making sure it's got the right oil and changed at the right time. It might be a good enough engine. They're now getting cheap enough that you can take a gamble on them, but a lot of other small pedals in this category, they're not much better. The Ford EcoBoost, you have to take this whole timing belt cover off, which makes it harder to work on. This isn't actually too bad an engine. If I was doing a timing belt, it looks fairly easy. Whatever other small pedals there are out there now have timing chains, and I don't think a lot of them are immune to timing chain problems and the costs that come with that. So yeah, if I had to buy a small 3-cylinder petrol engine, I suppose I would stick with Peugeot and Citroen and see how one of these goes. I don't know if one appeared in Copart, I would try see if I could save it by servicing it. But that's a quick look around the engine anyhow. Thanks for watching.